Day. We've been really focused on budget for the last few meetings, and now we're gonna be taking a look at some housing services, like providing housing for people and what's coming up with the housing phase. That's awesome. But first on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone in the room or online that has public comment?
Let's see.
Hi, this is John. Can you hear me?
You're not
So I
public,
just like to say I attended the meeting with the Housing Authority Board, a week or two ago with staff, and Molly and Steve and Ryan made a really good presentation. It was really well received, and I was very impressed with their formatting and their presentation and their verbiage. So I just wanted to compliment them. The good job they did, and the Housing Authority Board was also complimentary of the presentation.
Thanks, John. Yeah, everything went well. Yeah, nice. And John, thank you for representing us there. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's great to see the presentation.
Okay, so moving on, we're going to do roll call, and everyone's online, so please unmute and say that you're here. Bruce Dickinson.
Here.
Chris Iosa. Dave Bachman. Dina Castro. Haley Purdy is not here today. She's on vacation. Well deserved. John Epstein, I know you're here. You just talked.
Yes, here.
Chriselle Lucas.
Here.
Then Kimberly Cruy.
Here.
Nathan Teskey.
Here.
Nina Stafford. Paul Cummings.
Here.
And I'm here. Okay. Any other member updates? Anything anyone would like to share? What's that? Oh, Dina, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure you guys knew I was here.
Oh, okay. That was good. I did have you marked. Not doing. Thank you. Since our last meeting, there was we had the housing summit. That one is, I think we all know what the Housing Oregon Conference is, but they're trying to do a summit every year in different parts of the state, and this year they did it in Redmond. And that was a really big success. There were probably 200-300 people there. It was a lot of fun to hear what they're doing in Central Oregon. It's a different animal than the Portland metro area. So learned a lot. And if you can ever make it to one of those rural summits, they're calling it, it's definitely worth the trip. Okay, so if there's no other updates, we will move on to the executive director's report with Molly.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, summer is in full force. Molly Rogers, your director here at the Housing Authority of Washington County. We'll do some intros in a little bit after my updates, but we'll start at the federal level. Just have a moment to say we were so close to passing a pretty landmark passage of the called Road to Housing Act, otherwise known as ROAD, between full support between the Senate and the House, and then it's now getting stuck at President Trump's desk, who is now refusing to sign until the Senate and House passes the SAVE Act, which is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. So there was something for everyone in this act. We still remain, we remain hopeful we can find a path through our political means. There is, and I just a little bit of background, it was really significant. It was really bipartisan. So you really did bring both sides together. And passing this legislation, it was really focused on housing supply and more regulatory streamlining, which is always a plus. They wanted to encourage more construction. They wanted to also created more access to certain credit unions, and so they was really looking at institutional investors and then also increasing mortgage lending by small banks and credit unions. So it was kind of very comprehensive in how we were trying to tackle the housing issue. Excuse me, a little bit of a cold. And just a little bit of background, it was going to really affect us as a housing authority and also us as a funder of community development. So that's the Office of Community Development, bringing in community development block grant and home. But we wanted, it was also particularly, it was going to commission HUD to study work requirements to make sure there was evidence-based evaluation of that administrative burden and the household outcomes that come from work mandates, which is what the Trump administration has been trying to essentially encourage housing authorities to do. It also commits a moving to work expansion. So for those of you who are less familiar, there's different type. Moving to work is a HUD designation that gives us certain flexibilities and allows us to research different ways of providing rental assistance for households. And this one was going to create a new cohort focused on participant assets or credit building, which would have been really exciting. It also supports development by creating options for HUD to streamline environmental reviews through NEPA. We're all really excited about that one. So to make a long story short, there is still opportunity for folks to essentially reach out to your congressional delegation. There's a big letter writing campaign right now. We're in discussions internally of whether we can even submit a letter. This board, your board can chair, Kane may want to think about submitting the letters as well in support of this. So hopefully we can, the political powers that be can find a new way. This is actually coming on the heels of other major changes that are affecting all federal contracts through the Office of Management and Budget proposed rules. This is a pretty sweeping set of changes in who has authority to make contracting. Through the Uniform Guidance for Federal Grant Making process. There's this essentially proposed rule, very consistent with other executive orders, really focusing on the Trump administration's pullback of DEI and other gender ideology. And so what they're trying to do is they're giving OMB more authority to grant competitive funds to places that more align with Trump's executive orders. So that has been very challenging for states like Oregon, certainly municipalities like Washington County that are in compliance with all the executive orders, but we don't, it's a whole nother step beyond getting into every single competitive contract. That would, if these rules go into effect, it could affect our continuum of care and our family self-sufficiency grants. It could in fact impact the formula grants, which is CDBG and home and other federal financial assistance. It could also affect HGV and public housing. It's just less clear because those are more entitlement programs. So the real focus is on the competitive rating. So we do expect there to be legal challenge to this one, but it is way more granting authority to OMB and having OMB essentially ensure that every municipality who gets a competitive grant is enforcing all the executive orders in ways with way expanded authority that ever seen before. So that's one thing that I hopefully cooler heads can prevail, because both sides of the aisle would want there to be safeguards that not everything becomes a political issue in every single grant. So talking a little bit about state news, appreciate Ryan, you talking about the housing summit. I did want to just broach the subject that that our coalitions in housing are starting to, we're starting to hear little bit more focused areas that are not as much reflective of the work that we do here as a housing authority, particularly the Housing Alliance. So I wanted to share the news with you all that the Housing Authority of Washington County has recently decided to pull back our membership from the Housing Alliance. So that we're not the only ones. Other housing authorities have pulled back their membership in the past year. And the Housing Authority Association of Oregon has also pulled its membership from the Housing Alliance. And that is primarily due to a couple of reasons. Mainly, they have lost their staff and they lost their lobbyist. So it's going to take a moment for them to regroup. And we can always sign back up as they regroup. And then the initial indications we were hearing is they were wanting to focus in areas that we just weren't as adjacent to the work we do, but not core to the work that we do. And so we wish them well. And we're also working more closely with Housing Oregon, even though we're not on the board, but the Housing Authority Association has been having direct conversations with Housing Oregon and trying to help increase their capacity to do legislative work and to make sure the issues that we are facing around housing development, housing preservation, how we're shelter, rent assistance, that is going to hopefully get better covered by the work that they're doing at Housing Oregon. So let me just pause there and see if folks have questions. I do have other updates, but I think let me just take a pause.
Do we want to do a quick vote on a letter of support for the road bill? That if we
Yeah, I don't know if we even
do need a vote for
do we
that?
even need a vote, but because we don't have one drafted, but you could ask folks if they're willing to sign
Sure.
on once it's drafted.
Yeah, anyone just asking for comments, does anyone have any comments about the committee forming a letter and sending a letter of support for the road bill?
Yes, I agree. None other.
Yeah, let's work together and get something figured out, and then when Haley comes back, because I'm leaving today and then she's coming back next week, so I'll send her a quick email and maybe she can kind of take that on and get it out quick.
I'll keep moving on. So I think I mentioned last month we had some very exciting news, which is the Housing Authority received its first 9% low-income housing tax credit award by the Oregon Housing and Community Services for our Forest Grove Permanent Supportive Housing Project. So I'm happy to share with you that we have all of our full official package in the mail and submitted to OHCS to move that award forward, and the Housing Stability Council did approve it on June 5th. So really exciting seeing a full package of not just a 9% award, but yeah, thank you, Dina. It also is supporting us getting operating support and rental assistance and services dollars from OHA, which is huge. So that's a partnership between OHCS, Housing Community Services, plus the Health Authority is crucial in how we're really going to bridge healthcare and housing. So that is, we get to be a part of that grand experiment, which is great, and also be there in Forest Grove. So they've been super supportive. So we'll have we're going to do a deeper dive in a little bit, Dina, but just a quick shout out to Transcending Hope. It's going to be our behavioral health care provider. Is that behavioral health? And then
Yes.
also, thank you. We're building, we have our team assembled. So that's going to be exciting later. And then of course, that project represents the 13th Metro Bond project in Washington County, and upon which surpasses that 1,000 unit mark for the whole bond, or for the Washington County allocation of the bond, is also exciting. And then speaking of which, there's 2 more bond projects reaching major milestones this month. The first is the Dolores. It's a hacienda project. It's gonna have its grand opening. And also the Meadowlark is having groundbreaking, and that is a project by the Community House Partners for Affordable Housing, or SEPA. And I want to make sure, Nadia, has everyone been invited? Can we get everyone here invited to both those events? Great. We make sure you guys get to be a part of that celebration, both of those celebrations, both of which will have some project-based Section 8s and some permanent supportive housing. So that's great to have that further alignment with our partners as well. And then, as John alluded to, we had our HAWK budget was approved by our Housing Authority Board of Directors. Quick shout out to John for being there as a strong partner for the last couple of years now. You guys lend credibility to us as a viewer and a budget advisory committee body to say we've looked at these things, we have a due diligence process, we ask these sort of questions, and you guys do make a difference in how we present the information. So we're able to take your input and adjust the presentation accordingly. And I have to say, I haven't been through an experience before where we didn't actually get really hard questions from the board, including the chair. And we had really a resounding support from everyone on that board. So big shout out to Ryan Bonsbach and Steve Netter, who had just been here just over a year. At least Ryan's just a year, and has been able to really essentially elevate the work that we're doing in our financial picture, be able to tell our story, have full transparency, and do it in a way that people can understand. And that was really impressive. So thank you, Ryan. And thank you, John, for being a part of that. Just a reminder, since we're close to July 1, that is the date that we are rolling out our new payment standard schedule. So just a reminder for everyone, we came to you all a couple months ago, talked about the analysis of what we've been seeing in the marketplace. We're seeing some softening, not quite the same degrees as other parts of the state, but enough for 2 years in a row. We saw fair market rents go down in Washington County, or I should say the MSA, the metropolitan statistical area. So it behooved us to make some adjustments to our payment standard, a little bit downwards, but that is going to help us over a 2-year term, because it takes 2 years for these to go into effect for existing households. But it gives us a little bit of cushion so that we can absorb our households who are affected by the early sunset of the emergency housing voucher program, and be able to pull some folks off our wait list that we have been waiting on that wait list for years. We will give people hope again. And that is doing the hard work that sometimes we have to do in this moment where our federal funds have been relatively actually steady, but not keeping up with the full market. And to conclude, I'm really thrilled to remind everyone that June is homeownership month. And upon when I first started, we didn't really have a homeownership program. And then Jill started, and I said, let's have you create a homeownership program with our Section 18 disposition initiative. And that was really, I will say, supported and advocated by Nathan Teskey here from Vienna Star and other partners. You guys really did push us in this direction. And I could not be more thrilled to share with you that through our Section 18 initiative, we have created 16 first-time home buyers.
Wow.
16 out of 35 so far have been sold. So we are on, and of those 16, 5 were former residents, former renters in public housing.
That's, yeah.
So when we presented this concept to our board, one of the commissioners asked me what is your goal, Molly? I said, I have at least more than one. The goal is to create the opportunity and to build and at least test it out, and we will learn from it if we ever do this again. And And so I'm thrilled at those results. That was one of the questions of the board. Okay, so, yeah, so and then we are rapidly selling the rest over the next course of the fiscal year. So more to come on that front. And a quick shout out to Melissa Daly here, who's been the one managing that whole initiative. So, thank you. And with that, happy to turn over to more of your questions.
Very cool. I do, affordable homeownership is the buzzword going around right now for sure. And it was cool that the housing authority was on the front side of that. So that was years ago that it started to happen. And yeah. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Hi, John. This is maybe kind of nerdy about the real estate, but I'm curious, so how are we seeing, generally speaking, seeing our projects performing? I guess our occupancies are looking good. And then as you mentioned, there's kind of this weird thing where there's the delay in the rent adjustments, the way it kind of works. I don't know, that's sort of interesting. But also, how are we been doing? Because a lot I know of nonprofits and affordable house people have been suffering from, all this inflation stuff on their expense side. It's really been crunching their cash flows in addition to rents competition. So, I mean, overall, my question is, overall, our portfolio is looking okay from a cash flow perspective.
Yeah.
Hey, John, that's a great question, and there's so much news we've seen in the last month or, this whole year really, culminating in the recent article about Innovative Housing Inc. potentially declaring bankruptcy within 6 months.
Right.
And there are other, especially nonprofit organizations that are really, really stretched. We are, keep knocking on wood, in a fairly good position. Our occupancy right now across our, you can call it our own portfolio, both in the limited partnerships as well as in those that's directly owned by the housing authority, is about a 95% occupancy. It goes up and down.
Right.
Some are in worse shape than others because some of them are also in construction and like Heartwood, for example, it's both in construction as well as having some issues, I would say, in the referral process through coordinated entry. We're in the process of working that through. But generally, occupancy is about 95%. I do think we have some issues that we are trying to work through, especially on receivables. And the collection has been an ongoing issue. As even for those that are in our limited partnerships, because of the history of, you can call it lack of diligence in collections, but also the accumulation of effects. So we are implementing much tighter sort of compliance with what we have legal rights to, which is notices, collections, and ultimately, if things do not work out, potential evictions. So it is something the team on the asset management side is working very, very tightly on.
Okay, great, good, thanks. That's what I know that's the buzz right now. I mean, like, I'll just tell you, people don't know, I have a lot of respect for Innovative Housing's executive director. She's a really good, smart person. If she's having trouble making her organization work, it makes you really wonder. So, yeah. But okay, well, thanks for that information. It sounds like we're on top of it. And I know also on the expense side, it's just been inflationary stuff, so it'd be interesting to see when on your new 9% deal, if perm lenders and tax credit investors are underwriting more conservatively than they were 3-4 years ago, just because of what they're seeing currently in their portfolios. But okay, thank you for that update.
And I would say, John, our DCR is above 1.2.
Okay, well then you're looking good.
All about DCR, debt service coverage ratio.
Right, that's great. Good, thank you.
Right. Yeah, I have been hearing that underwriting has been an issue. Bigger banks are pulling out of Oregon, like where relying more on local credit unions with higher interest rates. And it sounds like part of that road bill might help
Mhm.
with that as well.
Jill and I and Lisa had some time with JP Morgan Chase from Seattle coming down just 2 nights ago. They're very much still interested in working with us in Washington County.
That's great.
So Oregon is not off the map yet.
That's great.
And we, but it is a combination of seeing the performance of our current real estate portfolio, but also the reputational work that we do here that does make a difference.
That's great.
And I do think a lot of, I mean, in that JP Morgan conversation, they did talk about, you know, real estate owned, the schedule, what's our cash flows, what's our audits look like, because they're all underwriters are taking a much tighter look at the financial capabilities of the sponsors.
Right, I'll just add, I think you all are on top of your finances and you have those great informational spreadsheets, and this is just my banker advice. If those things are prepared and tell a good story and you give them to your banker versus them saying, do you have this? And you're saying, oh, let me put it together for you, I'm not sure. It tells a great story when you already have those to show that you have a 1-2-0 and show how your properties are doing, and you just give it to them. It's like, oh, these people are really on top of it. They know where their portfolio is. I mean, that's just a piece of advice, and I know you're on top of it.
Thank you. Yeah, good reminder.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Thank you, Molly. And next we're gonna move up to the staff update, which normally starts with Nadia, but we're gonna start with Jill today.
Oh, I am very pleased to introduce, we finally hired our senior real estate development project manager. That's a long title. But essentially it just means somebody who is really great in real estate, affordable housing development. We hired Brandon Brezick from Central City Concern. We are so thrilled. He comes with so much experience. I want to say, I've worked with Brandon for, gosh, I think it's almost like 7-8 years. And he was on almost every project we invested when I was at Portland Housing Bureau with Central City Concern. He has done so much work, and we're just thrilled to have him. And I'm just gonna pitch it over to Brandon to say a few things about himself.
Yeah, hi everyone, Brandon Brezick. Yeah, I'm really excited to be joining the county. I grew up in Washington County, graduated of Southridge High School, so been in Portland since 2018. Graduated from University of Oregon, was at CCC for 5 years. Before that was at CASA of Oregon, developing tax-credit housing and manufactured housing cooperatives in rural Oregon. I have a ton of experience with permanent supportive housing, light tech housing development, and the development of mixed-use health services clinical facilities as well with CCC. So really excited to be jumping in with all the great work that Hawk is doing, and excited for Forest Grove to get the 9% award. It's going to be a great resource for the folks out in Forest Grove and in Washington County. Excited to see the behavioral health collaboration there. And so, yeah, just really looking forward to joining the team and helping out where I can, and learning about all the great work that you all are doing, and helping wherever I can. Thanks.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah, welcome, and congratulations to both of you.
That is the reason why Lisa can take a vacation.
Okay, thanks for the update, and back to Nadia.
Hey, hi everyone. I just wanted to let you know that it's summer and we're gonna give you a break next month. We will be taking the time to also prepare for the coming months, so we're not getting a break, but but we will be sending out some emails. So I will be sending out a new calendar series for these meetings for the rest of the year. I'll also be sending out some questions about just like updating your personal information. Some folks, if their names have changed or titles have changed or things like that, so we can have that updated. I will also confirm the the invites that Molly was talking about, for those, openings. I believe they're either sent out or in the works, and so I will, confirm that and those dates. And then also when we, reconvene in August, we should hopefully, have, I have the word inshallah in my head because I'm like willing, but that's, we will have two new appointments, that will be approved by Chabad. I know at least one, is mostly confirmed, and then, hopefully we'll have this, interview today and we'll be able to confirm another one. And those are specifically, oh, sorry, today's Thursday, tomorrow is the interview. Those two, just as a reminder, those positions were we're seeking out candidates who, were resident participants, in our housing, programs. And so we're really excited to get them on board. And I think that is it for me for now.
Any questions? Okay. It is also the chair report out. There's actually not a whole lot to report. We have Haley on board. We had our first prep meeting together. Haley led last month's meeting because I was under the weather, so it was perfect timing to bring on a co-chair. I did want to briefly talk about something Haley and I have been discussing of how the committee helps in the coming year, and really finding out more of what the individuals on the committee are passionate about and what they want to be involved in, so that we can bring to you what our passions are and maybe where we can support. So just committee members, start thinking about what you're passionate about in the housing realm, and if there's anything you would want to participate in outside of these meetings, and Haley and I will be in touch. All right, so the old business. And for this, we're going to go back to Jill and Joe to talk about the Forest Grove PSH project. And are we voting on something with this, or?
On
I
this one,
apologize.
I believe we would.
We-
Oh, it's not a vote, it's a consent.
Okay.
That's sort of like first
Information.
information, yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna be presenting on Forest Grove about a multitude of things, including the architect and the contractor that have been awarded.
Yeah.
And getting some comments and sort of general vote of confidence in
Yes.
moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. And for the record, I'm Jill Chen, Deputy Director of HAWK. With me is Joe Pizzone. He's our Capital Projects Improvement Manager. And for those who haven't met him, he is a wonderful addition to the HAWK team. Came from Sarah Architects. He has decades of experience just looking at the project and saying, what have you guys done? Why are we doing this? And then being able to help us negotiate better pricing. So we are thrilled to have Joe with us, but also to present the Forest Grove project. Next slide, please. So this is going to be a short agenda item. We're just going to talk about the project, the history, what we are going to be updating you all about. And let's go forward. Next slide, please. A quick project summary about the Forest Grove Permanent Supportive Housing Project. As you recall, this was a site we purchased back, I want to say in 2024, I think. It's been a while. And this is a site that is in Forest Grove, right near the Bi-Mart, where the Pacific Avenue splits. It is currently a car repair shop. And we are planning to have a permanent supportive housing site on it. We selected the site because it is close to transportation, but also the program is for 45 mainly studios and 1 bedrooms, serving homeless and formerly homeless population, targeting the Latinx population with referrals at a coordinated entry. As Molly mentioned, thank you, Dina, for being our partner as the behavioral health provider. We also have Central Cottrell as our resident service provider and Care Oregon, who is providing us funding. Next slide, please. A bit of a history, as we mentioned, we, along with Care Oregon and Centro, participated in the Permanent Supportive Housing Institute project back in the summer of 2024. The property came into contract, we purchased it. Took a while to figure out how we were going to work on this particular project, what was the funding sources, and did we go under the new OHCS application process, ORCA, or did we go for 9%? We went with a 9%, and we were just approved on the 9%. And with that, I hand it over to Joe to talk about where we are now.
Thank you, Jill. Once again, Joe Pinzone, Capital Improvements Project Manager. On the Forest Grove Permanent Supportive Housing Project, a little bit about the development timeline. Next slide, please. Sorry. We started planning and funding applications in early 2026 of this year. We've gone through and made some selections around service providers, the architect, the general contractor. That was very recent in the last couple of months. Our next phase is once we get everyone approved by Chabad and moving through that and the final negotiations, we'll be getting into the permitting and construction start really towards the end of 27 is what we're expecting with that, with construction completion latest in the early of 2029, and then of course leasing up in that same year. Next slide, please. So our current status, to go over what the timeline is, we've completed our due diligence and selected the team members that you can see. For the architect, we have selected Scott Edwards. Architecture for the general contractor was Walsh Construction, and you can see case management, resident services, both Transcending Hope and Centro Culturel, along with Care Oregon. The financing portion, as Jill has already mentioned, we do have some nice financing with this, with $6.74 million in the Metro Affordable Bonds, another $3 million in the Care Oregon grant. We did, as mentioned now for the third time, our first 9% LIHTC.
I'm gonna say it 3 more times.
Hey, that's right. And why not? That is awesome. And so as we look at, the operational rental assistance and other supportive services going in for the project. So next slide. For the architect selection, we issued the RFP in March of this year. We actually received 11 proposals from some very highly qualified firms, very competitive. We interviewed 3. You can see there, Scott Edwards, MWA, and Holst were the 3 shortlisted firms. And of that, you can see the scoring that went through at 155, 150, and 126. And then, of course, with the highest score through the proposal and the interview phase, Scott Edwards was selected, and contract negotiations will happen through Chabad. And the next slide, please. So some of the highlights of why SEA was selected is they have a substantial history of doing affordable housing and permanent supportive housing, which was key for this particular project, since that's what it is. It's a very challenging project type. They've got a lot of work in other areas directly adjacent to permanent supportive housing. They've been working in Washington County for a long time, 28 years in county. And one of the things that they also do is sustainability is one of their core firm beliefs and mantras. And so they include that as part of their basic design process, which was very interesting to our group, because that's something we're looking to try and improve in all of our projects. Also, their proposed consultant team almost nipped 34% on COVID participation. So they had a really, really well qualified and diverse team. Next slide, please. For the general contractor, we issued those RFPs in April, just after the architect. We received 5 proposals. And of those 5, Hawk has direct working experience with 3 of them. But the ones that were shortlisted were Walsh, Colas Construction, and LMC. And you can see the scoring there. It was very tight. But Walsh had the final edge in scoring from the proposals and the interviews. And so Walsh was selected, and we'll start the negotiation once again once they're through Chabad. And the next slide, please. So Walsh, as many of you may know, has an extensive experience in affordable housing. That's kind of their main work. They've got 23 projects just in 2025 alone, including 8 permanent supportive housing projects. That was a key element because of the permanent supportive housing, what we're trying to do in Forest Grove. So being able to lean on both our design partner and our construction partner to help provide us the most cost-effective and well-designed building was a key component for the selection committee. They're a values-driven company, specializing in high quality and affordable housing and permanent supportive housing. They're industry leaders in their QA/QC program, especially when it comes to exterior envelopes, well-renowned, and they have a proven track record of getting projects over 30% using local participation in COVID contractors. And with that, I'm going to turn that over to Jill to talk about our selected partners.
Thanks, Joe. As mentioned, our service partners, this is just a sort of a reiteration of who they are with Transcending Hope Central and here in Oregon. We are thrilled, Dina, to have you join this team. And you'll see that Dina, as Transcending Hope, is not part of this Chabad presentation that we're going to be making in July, because of the way we do our RFPs for these supportive services. So, but we're thrilled to have our complete partner package available to go into the financing process. Next slide, please. So the action items for our July 7th board meeting will be really to ask the board of directors for the approval for the architect and the GC. And this will help us move the process along with the state and the financing. Next slide, please. So really, as part of our presentation, what we would like for us to seek from HAC in terms of helping us think about our program is based on your experience on permanent supportive housing. What are some things that HAWK should incorporate in this project, especially about design, operations, financial considerations? What guidance do you have for us about our outreach and community services or community outreach and members, especially people that you think might be important? And last but not least is what other key factors should we keep as we move forward in this project? I should mention to especially those of us who are numbers oriented or finance oriented, in this particular project, we are not having any long-term debt. We went into the application seeking no long-term debt, it's only construction loan. And we think that's also a smarter move because it is permanent support housing.
Do you want to just take one of these at a time, Jill?
Yeah, so let's talk about the first one. Are there things we should incorporate based on your experience about permanent support housing? Any suggestions, thoughts?
One thing we found really successful is the tenants that you're serving once they're you're fully occupied, having something that connects them to the building. For instance, we did a a mural in the common space that was a paint by numbers. So an artist came in and did a paint by number thing and then left paint for the people that live there, and they could come down and paint whenever they wanted, so they feel like they're part of that, really forming that connection to where you live.
Good idea.
Have to give us names later.
Yeah, we'll do. And on the finance side, you know, we've talked about the funding for PSH, the long-term funding kind of being stagnant. Is this already awarded the state lift?
This we
Funds.
did get, in addition to the 9%, we asked for the most amount that we could get out of 9%. We also asked for the most amount we could get of gap funds, which is 4 million. We did get that as well. And we also asked for all the rental assistance for all 45, which we got. And we also got all the supportive services monies, which works out to, I think, 15,000 per person, per unit, per year.
But not lift, it wasn't lift, that was.
It was not lift, it was just gap fund.
Okay.
Yeah.
PSH program.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
PSH.
yeah.
PSH, yeah. So it was a nice package, but I still think we, and I will be blunt, in our own projections, based on what we know about Heartwood. There is a potential gap as we go further out because of things such as security.
Yeah.
And if we have to provide 24/7 security, it throws every building upside down.
Yep. Any other considerations from the board on design or financial considerations?
Is there more of a focus today on products for sustainability and low maintenance? I mean, so this is a project that's designed not to take on debt and doesn't really have excess cash flow. So you want things that don't require, you want longevity and sustainability in your product mix, opposed to maybe, I guess I'm trying to say this politically correct, opposed to putting money into maybe attractive design stuff, putting more money into products that really last. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't know.
That makes 100% sense. Sometimes when we're building the buildings, just from my new experience, we're wanting to go with most cost effective, which does not have the wear and tear of other sustainable products. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm just sort of saying, I mean, I think sometimes, you know, it's hard because you only have so much to spend. All I'm saying is, you know, I don't know if this, I don't want to stereotype, but I don't know if this population is maybe harder on buildings than some other populations or not. And I'm just saying, designing in a way that's functional, but, you know, it is permanent. You're not competing as much in the market to attract people, right? So you want to make it very livable. You want to make it nice, but maybe instead of making something a super high-end design thing to compete for rents, is taking that money and putting into things that are really sustainable design. You know, more money into flooring or countertops that last longer, or cabinets that last longer, because you don't have the ability on this thing to kind of go out and raise money to fix things. It's a different financial structure. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I'm really making sense, but I'm just sort of saying I think that's important to look at.
Well, and I think
Thanks.
I think that Central Cultural and Transcending Hope with their case management also kind of have a piece in that when it comes to maintaining if there's life skills that need to be supported, things like that.
And John, I think one of the things that is important is the durability of the products we're putting in. Because we're not probably, how would I say this? It doesn't sound right. We're not gonna go for the prettiest and best looking product, so to say. We're gonna go in probably for the most durable and sustainable. And that can take on really heavy wear and tear.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay.
Paul, I see your hand up, but Dina also had a comment on incorporating community space for residents to connect
Yep.
And making
That's
sure.
a part of
that
the program.
Yeah. And Paul?
Having some challenges today, but it's not a design comment, but maybe a follow-up on what John was saying. I think it's great that you're not going to have must pay debt. But like Jill, you talk about security would make it a challenge on the expense side. So how much success do you think you have in pushing your budget to get, you know, a much larger reserve approved on the front end, where you have some protections over time? Or do you see this where you're really going to have to stay under a per unit cost for the total development? And so to take what might have been a reserve where if you had debt, you do a 3-month reserve, a 6-month reserve, to do a reserve against operating expenses, that there's going to be pressure to contract that and make it closer to zero.
I think we're looking at, you can call it beefing up the reserves as much as we can that is allowed. Most likely, not only an operating reserve and a capital reserve, probably a lease up reserve as well, because lease up in these PSH units seem to take a while. But also our projections show in the beginning of the projections, we are going to be okay financially, meaning throwing off some cash flow and potentially putting that cash flow in and not taking it out. So after we paid off whatever deferred developer fees there are, just keeping the money in a project instead of taking anything out, because we need to keep that reserve healthy.
And similar to Heartwood, Paul, we've been able to supplement some of those additional intensive expenses with the supportive housing services measure. So we're prepared to be able to have that, you know, be able to understand what we might need to supplement at some stage. But to Jill's point, we're maximizing the state resources first before we look at the regional measure, but it is a backstop.
That's right. Thank you.
Do we move on to the community outreach strategy and engagement? Any thoughts around that? I can start a little conversation there too. Hopefully the community engagement agreements are really important. We not only bringing yourself there and but bringing the providers, bringing the police department, bringing other community members that have had PSH added to their community, you know, and sharing their stories about it is always really good. But the key part is the community knowing who to call when there's an issue and that they know that someone's going to respond. So keeping that agreement in the lobby of the building, so that if they get a call, they have that reference of when this happens, they know who to call at the housing authority and they know who to call at the local police, especially in this community, because it is the first PSH in Forest Grove.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not really going to know what to expect from it.
And just as an FYI, Lisa and I plan to be presenting this project in front of the Forest Grove City Council in middle of March. Not March, July, just a couple weeks, just a week after our presentation to Habab. So I'm sure that will be one of the questions. So if there are folks here who have suggestions about what else we should do, it'll be useful to have that sort of, so we can have it ready.
I have a question for clarification, Ryan. When you say community engagement agreement, are you referring to like a good neighbor agreement?
Yeah, pretty much same thing. We flirted with a community improvement plan is one thing we called it, of how this project's going to improve the community and bring added security and community engagement. I was ADAPT had a project where the community members had like a cleanup day, or the people in the that that moved in. They had a cleanup day where they went around and met the people, engaged in picking up litter and helped one lady mow her yard. And that really helped.
Of course, next door is a cannabis shop, so. I've
Yeah.
been able
By the way, if there's any suggestions on how to get rid of a cannabis, I'd love to hear that. Been trying to reach those guys for over a year and a half.
Yeah.
Anyone has contacts.
So I assume you have a contract with Dina's organization on, so there's security, and then is there a commitment from that support organization to commit staffing so many hours a week, or how does that work?
Are you, is this to me or to?
Well, out of the group or you, I mean, is the agreement, I mean, usually there's agreements on how much, so you say there's 24/7 security, but what about social service support? I mean, is the contract this many days a week, 20 hours a week? I mean, what's the support? Or is that still being negotiated?
Well, yeah, Jill, you can correct me if I'm wrong. We submitted a proposal to the application, and then we are in the beginnings. I think we've had our first meeting with Washington County, and we're in the beginnings of solidifying how all that works. Transcend Hope does have their own emergency line that we use in our other 30 locations, but I don't know that that will be part of this project because we are in the beginnings.
Yeah, and John, under the OHCS guidance for permanent supportive housing, one of the reasons we put 45 households or members in the unit is OHCS's benchmark is one caseworker for every 15 residents. So
Okay.
here, the goal is for Dina's team to have 3 FTEs working in this site.
Okay, that was my question. Like, what kind of support you're getting for the population? Okay.
And this is not the security, meaning, the
Right.
folks who make sure that, no break-ins and all that. This is the wraparound service.
Right. That's my question was about. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah.
last question. From your perspective, what key factors should Hawk keep in mind as we move forward with this project?
We said it all.
Okay.
That was really good engagement. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Well, just to say, I know SEA and Walsh, you're in great hands. They're really well respected in the industry and you're the best. So.
Thank
You're
you.
thrilled by the response.
Yeah.
For both our groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks, Jill and Joe. Appreciate that.
Welcome.
So we are moving on to new business and going back to Jill.
Sorry, this is all real estate.
And Molly and Melissa will also be participating in the conversation around the Aloha 209 project. And just so everyone knows, the committee knows, at the end of this, we are going to be having a vote to essentially how the committee can support advocating for funds being released to support this project from OHCS.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna just set the stage for Aloha 209 project update. And where we are with me is my colleague, Melissa Daly, Senior Program Coordinator. And she's been our project manager, working with our consultant Bronner on this project. This project, as you recall, next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about our project, where we are, what are some of the issues we are facing right now, and sort of a committee. As you might recall, this is a project that we are developing, this is a project we're developing with, in conjunction with Bronner on Metro owned site. And with that, I transfer it over to Melissa to just talk a little bit about the project itself.
Hi, thanks, Jill. Yeah, my name is Melissa Daly. I'm a senior program coordinator in the real estate development division. So Aloha 209, as it says, it's a new construction 4-story building with 2 elevators. There will be 87 units, a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. We're serving 30% to 60% area median income with 9 units at 30% AMI. Those are not supported by vouchers. We have 12 ADA accessible units, which is higher than the OHCS requirement that is based on public or the review, our public advisory committee recommendations. There are wetlands, as you can see the little bit in the pictures there on site, which we are rehabilitating. And it's just slightly over 3 acres, 3.01 acres in unincorporated Washington County in Aloha on the corner of 209th and Alexander. So there are 78 units at 60%, next slide, yes, at 60% AMI, 9 of them at 30% AMI, 12% are the ADA units. And yeah, that's just a little bit of restatement from the last slide. We can move to the next one. So the project did receive, we had quite a bit of community-led engagement. Metro, as Jill mentioned, acquired this site through the Metro Site Acquisition Program, which is a Metro-led program of the Metro Affordable Housing Bond. And then they convened, they worked with Unite Oregon to convene a project advisory committee. And most recently in June 2025, had a visioning charrette with over 17 partners. And that then all the work that there'd been many more meetings before that, though, many meetings with this committee. And that guided the statement of community values, which then informed the design, which was included with the RFP when we hired and chose the architect. So the residents had asked for interaction with the natural wetland. Seeing those wetlands is a real opportunity that you don't really have with affordable housing every day. And so looking at also quiet outdoor green spaces, seating areas, restoring the functioning of the wetland, and just having interaction with that space. And now I'll hand it off to Jill.
Next slide, please. So we were recently, just a few weeks ago, notified by Oregon Housing Community Services that they do not have funding under the LIFT program for this project, and the earliest they will be able to provide any funding would be 2028. We had targeted this program, this project, to be funded. Actually, our timeline was in spring of 2027 to start construction, financially close and start construction. So we are looking at potentially at the earliest an 18 months delay. So we are coming to you to talk about how we can advocate for this project. We believe this is a fully baked project, and it is what we call really ready. Not just ready, we will be ready in 3-4 years while we wait in line to get money. We, as an organization, have spent almost $1 million on this project, excluding the site acquisition program, which spent almost $3 million to acquire the site. So you'll see that there's a site secured. Our design is complete. We are already at 100, we've already passed 100% design development, and we're already moving forward to actually the construction sets. We have already had our first round of value engineering, so the cost estimates with our general contractor Trubeck has already gone through one round. We are now down to hopefully this is gonna stick, is about 660,000 a unit, which is actually about 150,000 less than some of the other projects which recently was approved through the Metro bonds for family side projects. Our permits has already been submitted. This is for wetlands. We have already moved forward with state lands. We've already moved forward with our land use, which is the first phase. And we are anticipating that with the design from Bora, our architect, we will be able to submit everything by October 2026, which is just a few more months for the full permit set. And just for your information, once permits are approved, they actually expire, I believe 180 days after permits are approved. So our partnership is also formed. Everything on there is ready to go. And our gap funds are ready. I mean, everything is ready. Next slide, please. A little bit more about gap funds. You'll see here that we are looking for lift of 17.5 million. All of the other funding sources are pretty much intact. We've got letters of intent from our tax credit partner, potentially a tax credit, a letter of intent from RBC. We've got a permanent loan, also a letter of intent from JP Morgan. Our Metro bonds are in place. Our sponsor loan of HPOF and IN grants are in place. So everything on the funding source is secure, except for the left. And our numbers on the right, which is the uses, has also already gone through one value engineer. Next slide, please. So we are this is all back of the envelope still because nobody knows what cost is going to be in 18 months. It could be even more, but we look at that as a potential of a $6 million gap if we wait. We are ready to be moving forward April 2027. And we are right now waitlisted under the Oregon Housing Community Services, what they call the ORCA process, we're labeled TC18. It just means we're way back on the bottom of the totem pole. My estimate is that if they move everybody across, we may not even be in 2028. We may be in 20, depending on monies gets passed in the next legislative round. So there is that risk of potential loss of our funding from the different funding sources listed. Next slide, please. So the requested action is to provide a letter of support for Lower 209 project so that we could access the 2026 legislative session, which passed 100 million for OHCS, 75 million was dedicated for new construction. We're asking to be using that money and to urge OHCS to really prioritize a Lower 209 because we are really ready. We will be permit ready by early next year. And if we don't get the funding, we can potentially be set back, not just a few months, but potentially a few years. So open this for discussion and comments. I believe Nadia had sent a draft letter in the package. That was the letter that Molly was planning to send in to Director Bell who is head of Oregon Housing and Community Services. So we are hoping either separate letter of support from HAC, or maybe if HAC members would want to sign on the same letter. Open to whatever suggestions, recommendations.
So kind of first off, is there any questions on the ORCA process or understanding, what's going on with this project? Nathan?
Yeah, Ryan, thanks. Jill, Bannistar has worked through some projects in the ORCA process. Their mantra is first ready, first served. And you're describing this project as fully ready. So the explanation from OHCS is they just have no money to commit to this project?
That is what we have heard, that their mantra is not first ready, first served, it's first in line. So because of when we put our full application in, and this is, we and our consultant Bronner were under a misunderstanding of what ready meant. Because we thought they actually wanted designs. We thought they actually wanted firm numbers. We thought they actually wanted LOIs. So we didn't send in our, you can call it our submittal in early 2025. We sent it towards the end of 2025. So
Where other developers went in
much
without
earlier.
having as much of a baked project, and they just did paperwork.
I see.
Higher up
Yeah.
the list.
Yeah. I see. Well, that's interesting, because I will say, as the ORCA process was rolled out, when we had meetings with OHCS repeatedly, they used this first ready, first served criteria as the guidepost. And I guess I certainly support writing a letter. I sort of hate to be a downer, but I don't think it's likely to have a big impact. Us writing a letter, I'm all in favor of it. I think it's fine. I guess the only other point, I'm sure you're already doing this, but when Bannistar's doing projects, we are at whatever stage we're in, even if it's the intake stage, Jill, which I think is what Molly was just describing. We're just talking to the OHCS staff constantly about, not constantly, literally every day, but on a very regular basis, to understand what they're doing in their process and what they want. And so I'm sure you've been doing that, but I would, say keep trying to do that, because that's pretty discouraging to get that far along. I mean, this close and then have this huge delay, because I agree that's way too long to wait, and the risk of the cost inflation is just very significant there. So I'm all in favor of the letter. And I don't know if it'll help, but I'm all in favor of doing it. So thanks.
And Paul, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you. I was trying to lower my hand here. I do think that it is quite likely, and maybe Molly, you talked a little bit about this in your initial remarks, but that there are some deals that might be, it sounds like, Jill, in front of this deal, but may not get all parts of the capital stack secured. So, to the extent that you've already done this work, beyond the letter, it does seem like there may be an advantage if it's, I don't have it up here, but if it was RBC or whoever on the tax credit equity and the debt, if you're to go back and not just, I think an LOI is helpful, and they might hold pricing, things like that, but it's almost like, just for your own benefit, for RBC, just to understand it as the capital, is it really able to be committed to that deal in the first quarter for the tax credit equity and for the debt? Because I think you might just want to highlight to the state that you have a deal that is cost ready, time ready, and capital ready to go. And I think that may be a distinction, which other deals that might be in front of this deal on the lift allocation may not get their capital secured. And I think there is, I know Molly's aware of this and others, but I think there are a lot of capital sources out there that don't really understand the difference between Multnomah County and Washington County. But I think when it's when it's made clear, it might be that they're going to be deals that are going to be picking certain geographies. The capital will be. And so again, when it gets sorted out, some of the deals that might be in other parts of the region just may not see the capital. So I think the state will then have to decide, are they going to go down and just allocate capital to deals that are working? Or are they going to hold out and try to backfill a deal that's higher up on the priority list, but doesn't have its capital stack in place? So it's, again, just, it might be worthwhile for you to go back and get some additional confidence from the tax credit equity and the lenders. It's not just letter of interest and pricing, but you need to know you have a slot in their capital plan for this deal if it gets funded.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
So this is John. So I assume everybody else, maybe they put their stuff in earlier, but once they started grading these, were they still as far along in commitments as you? Because I think, don't they use a very structured point system about you're this far along, you get 3 points, you're this far along, you get 2 points? Isn't that when you get to the end, isn't that more what's dictating it versus how soon you put your application in?
That's kind of the old way.
Yeah, that's how it used to be.
Yeah.
It used to be that way, John, but right now, because of, first of all, because of the long timeline, I was joking with Jonathan over at Home Forward. He's the developer. And I was like, hey, any one of us can get a deal ready, like really ready within 2 years, right? You give me a spot on the list, I'll get something ready.
Yeah.
I don't know what, but I'll get something ready.
Yeah. Oh, that's not changed. And yeah.
Right, so right now, as far as I understand, it is just first in line, first to be funded.
Yeah.
But,
And
okay. I guess I'm from the old regime. I've been out of the day-to-day too long, because that used to be how it was driven, pretty much.
Yeah, used to be that. Oh, Brandon.
Yeah, I think to Paul's point earlier, I think they do, as you are up on the wait list and next up, if your project's not ready, they're gonna go to the next one. And so
Right.
I think if we did nothing, there's a chance that maybe because we're so ready, we pass everyone eventually. But I think this letter will definitely help put the pressure. So encourage them.
And on that letter, some things we've been discussing, well, the two options are, do we have our own letter that brings a little bit more of the committee's experience with the housing authority and why we know this will be a successful project? Or do we just add our support to Molly's letter, maybe listing not just the committee, but the individuals that we are, to show who this committee is made of? And I mean, we are people that do affordable housing and understand affordable housing and live in affordable housing, and they that little extra support might help. Does anyone have opinions on which way we go, or are you okay with us listing everyone's name individually? I can tell you're thinking, John.
Yeah, I don't know.
But if it's okay, we should still do a vote, and the vote's gonna be it's gonna be a little general, just to give us a little flexibility on how we move forward. Of the committee is in support of Haley and I signing either a separate, helping form and sign a separate letter of support, or signing Molly's letter of support.
May I jump in here?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And I was just gonna, it was a good point of, Haley and I might both be gone next week. We don't know if Haley's gonna be back. I think she is, but just in case, if John, like you said last time, Haley or I or another representative can sign on behalf of the committee.
Thank-
Right, so I guess, what I would say is not trying to be a chicken here. I think it's better, I don't think you need to have everybody sign. I think if you just say you have full support or you had a unanimous vote from your committee, right, with professionals in the industry. I think it just looks a little odd having like 15 people's names under this on this advisory committee. But I assume also, in addition to sending this letter, do you try to get a personal meeting with them to sit down and really, versus a phone call or a Zoom call, just to, on something like this, I think you pick up some credibility just being face to face and having a discussion across a desk with somebody about your letter.
Yeah, so 2 points to that. One is I already reached out to Andrea Bell that I'm already preparing to send them a letter just so that she is not surprised. Just being in that position, you don't want to, to be blindsided. It's very, this is not a role that the housing authority has typically played in terms of how we align for a letter of support, because typically we've been more housing authorities a funder. So as a developer, on developer hand, I want to give her that heads up, and she said, "Yep, let's have." So she's open to having a discussion, which is great.
Okay.
The second piece I would just suggest is I think it would be lovely if there was a separate letter from just HAG, than my letter, just because you guys may be making different points. You guys are going to take a broader perspective. You're going to make your lending, your advisory body role in having that. There's a certain tone that kind of is a little bit different than me as a director coming in saying, "Hey, this is why we're talking about this project." So, having your individual names either on the sidebar or sort of here are the members, or even you've been signing, I think it bolsters the fact that we do have folks with incredible expertise who have been guiding us through this process. You're with us you're with us in this moment and trying to understand the work of process. So either way, but I just think lending as many names as possible does lend that sort of credibility, but I don't want to put anyone on the spot that may or may not feel comfortable.
Go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, I'm fine. You want to use my name? I don't want to put other people on the spot. There's other organizations and executive directors here who might also be asking them for money, who might want to be a little more not face forward on it's their decision.
Would you all at least, so how on letterhead you have at least, you have HAC members and we have names, but perhaps the letter is just signed by the co-chairs. What do you think of that possibility?
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think the co-chair thing makes more sense. Hey, Ryan or Molly, this is Bruce, just real quickly.
You cut out there, Bruce.
Oh, how's that? Any better?
Yeah.
Yep.
Just real quickly, you guys have done a great job at outlining what ready means. There's some conjecture in the conversation on what's their priority. Is it first in? Is it most ready? Maybe it's already been said, but I would just, maybe the comment, ignore the question, answer whatever you want. Make sure we really define what our definition of ready is.
Great. There'll be conversations we need to have as an industry and all the other coalitions on this specific point, I think. And Nathan will have conversations offline too, but we should, I think we believe they should get crisper in what clear metrics are to identify what readiness means ideally in a more objective way.
Yeah. If there's a scorecard, we'd love to see it now for future, just so we're properly prepared.
Yeah.
I'll call it the Epstein's scorecard.
Yeah. My 2 cents on that also for Jill's team is just, I wonder if you because obviously the relationship we have with OHCS is dependent on the person who's assigned, like the contact person and how they communicate with you. And I can't, just knowing the relationships that Venistar has with a couple of staff there, it's kind of hard for me to imagine that Venistar would get to this place unless we were getting like poor guidance or advice from our contact person at OHCS. So as you talk to Andrea Bell and stuff, like, I mean, there does need to be consistency across all their different program staff. And I just wonder, Jill, if you were getting different messages, like, because I don't think we would get this far along without having pretty clear assurance from our contact point that, you know, we knew the timeline for the project to be moving forward. So it does make me wonder about who you had assigned and how consistently they're applying this across different projects. This first ready, first served idea. Anyway. Because I mean, the whole idea of the intake thing was not to have first in line, we're just going to get you. The idea was, do you have a viable project? And if you have a viable project, you can move on to the next stage, and you're sort of working hand in glove with OHCS every step of the way to avoid this kind of miscommunication. So anyway, it's
I think
unfortunate.
that's a great point, Nathan. I just want to respond real fast before Jill talks about the relationship. I will say, because we know that there is, you look at the whole list, it's $1.5 billion ask set of projects we need to win. So I actually think the bigger issue is every sponsor and every project will eventually get to this place by virtue of them not having enough in lift. I mean, it's all about in the legislature now. And the initial years made sense because we knew we're just building the wait list, but now that it's built out, we know everyone will, once you start building that next project, Nathan, it will go to the bottom of that list and you're.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. That's the core problem. And that's why the OHCS people are between a rock and a hard place, because they just have too many requests. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was part of the reason for having this ORCA process.
Yeah.
Is that the state, maybe the governor, wanted to demonstrate what was that pent up demand, right? We had always said there was this huge pent up demand for gap funding. Now we've seen how big it is. The problem, I think, for all of us is the metrics or the selection criteria was not objective. So, for example, land, instead of actually a deed of trust or a actual PSA, it was just a letter of intent to buy a piece of land, right? So that's a huge difference in terms of readiness. Just like when we talk about design, do you actually need to have drawings or is it just a conceptual? And the permitting, was it just a plan for permitting versus actually submittals? So I think this is where the clarification about criteria and metrics is where I'm hoping that OHCS can be much clearer to all of us, because no one wants to wait 5 years. It's not just us as developers or funders, but I'm thinking of the folks who have provided pre-development loans. Instead of being out there for 2 years, they're now going to be out there for 5 years. It's the risk is much, much higher for everyone.
Yeah. And I agree, like it's exactly, we're at that, we need step 2 to happen. Step 1 was change the system to where it's not a NOFA thing where the projects that don't get funded just go away. And I mean, they're there, but they're not tracked anymore. This kept track of that, showed the need, and step 2 was fill the need. And yeah, that needs to happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
so on the requested hack action, going back, I think there was 2 questions. First of all is, would we be able to get a vote for a letter of support? And the other one was, I think, Ryan's question, would there be the 1 letter, meaning with Molly, or 2 letters in which HAC as our advisory committee would put on a slightly more different sort of broader role instead of a specific one. And I wanted to bring that requested action back to you.
And it sounds like a separate letter would be more beneficial, but just in case, we'll do the vote for either action, just because of timing of the co-chairs, unfortunately. So I guess what request a motion to designate myself or Haley or another representative for Nadia to reach out to if we're not available to form a separate letter of support or to sign Molly's letter to OHCS for the Aloha 209 project. First need a motion to vote.
I'll make that motion.
And a second.
I'll second that.
So I'm gonna ask for all of those in favor, all of those opposed, and then abstain. If you're here and you don't answer no or abstain, I'm gonna put you in the yes because there's a lot of us. So all of those in favor.
Aye.
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 All of those opposed? Would anyone like to abstain? Okay, so it is approved. We will support you in best way we can.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
All right. So I believe that is everything, correct? Get out a little bit early, but first since it is a quorum, we do need to vote on ending the meeting as well. So I'd like a motion to adjourn.
I'll move, John.
And a second.
I'll second, Paul.
Okay. And then it's just adjourned, right? Yeah, that's all we need. We don't actually need to allow it. Meeting adjourned.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Everyone.